As I look out at our world, I see so many efforts by so many different people, organizations, groups to affect change, through conversation, through science, through actions, sometimes through protest, conflict, or even war. And yet the change we seek eludes us. Behind it all, there's always that feeling that something's wrong and it has to change. Everything in our world, including change, begins with a seed. And the quality of that seed will definitely shape what grows from that seed, the fruit. If my seed is filled with feelings of discontentment, that something's wrong, the fruit, the growth, will also have echoes of discontentment. I need a different seed to create true change. Yes, a seed that's filled with the vision of what is possible. But also a very strong injection of contentment. A feeling that there's something right within the human spirit. And not trying to draw out the change through violence or protest or science or even conversation, but trusting the powers of peace, of silence, acceptance, harmony, to water that seed of change, of deep contentment. Opening to a new approach, to true change. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. Good evening and welcome to Interview with Raj Yogi. Tonight's topic is spiritual change for the future. So these topics are inspired by the themes that the regular students are examining the day, whether for morning class, just this global theme that we've been invited to reflect on. So when I hear about the future, and I thought that this theme felt very meaningful, at least for me, and without Raj Yoga, we have this perspective of ourselves, this physical. We have perceptions when we hear the word future. So, Judy, when we're talking about Raja Yoga, what comes to mind when it comes to future that makes it unique versus when we hear changing for the future, just on a day-to-day level?
Perhaps for many, so often, this word future sounds like something that exists, and we're just going to sort of walk into it, like another scene in a movie or something. But Raj Yoga looks at spiritual laws, and one of them, of course, is that there are consequences from the present that ripple into what we call the future. So it kind of puts a different spin on how things unfold in our world in many different ways. And this is one of them, that actually what I'm doing right now is creating the future. And the future, as we think of it, will actually look a lot like the past, unless I do something different right now. So there's a deep connection between past, present, and future, but it's not that we are passive in it all. It really gives us a lot of creative or mastery empowerment in terms of there's the past. The past obviously is very connected to what I'm sitting in right now in the present, and it will ripple into the so-called future unless I do something different at the present time.
Do you feel that when it comes to just a lot of physical examples, fitness, and just moving to a new place, that we get that concept? You need some sort of preparation for change, but for some reason, there seems to be a missing link of understanding when it comes to spirituality.
I've always felt that spirituality is very sensible if it's the real deal, but also requires a certain element of honesty as well. And so probably the first thing that spirituality invites or sort of asks us to look at honestly is whether or not we're really open to change. And there's, I suppose, two ideas about change we have. One is when something that we experience as aversive is going on. At that time, we say, oh, yes, we're very open to change. Let the change come. But when there's something going on that we really, so for example, from the dentist's office, I'm very open to change. But if I, no offense to dentists, and I actually love my dentist, I like it when I'm there, actually, I might be odd. But when we're involved in something that we're very attached to or deeply engaged with, we sort of say, no, I don't want any change. So again, change or a concept of it or a relationship, it has sort of gotten connected to desires rather than benevolence or what is beneficial. Yes, it will be perfect if what I desire is also what is beneficial. That would be the perfect scenario if they're one and the same. So what that means is that perhaps we're looking at a model, well, whatever is happening, whatever change or lack of change is going on, is beneficial for that moment. It's trying to invite something different so I have a different future. So really to have this attitude or this lens of benevolence as I look at the current situation is actually going to make me far more instrumental in being part of change.
Perhaps it's what our perception of change is that is the issue. Because if you look at, you're talking about the dentist, if you have a cavity, you want some change. But I was thinking about even preparation for a marathon when they practice ahead of time. Perhaps I do notice that, on a day-to-day level, we want change to happen. Perhaps we don't call it spiritual, but we do want things to change. But we seem to have a different perception of, I suppose, of maybe what that change is supposed to be, what it's supposed to look like.
I was really touched the other day, and it's a very odd series of events, actually, but through some convoluted mechanisms, someone came and was very interested in personal training. And so what we always do is have first a strategy session where we get to know them and what's going on. And their case had been referred, so I had a little bit of information. I didn't realize how much more there was to it, but I was like, oh my goodness. So, quite athletic hockey. This already is signals, flares, playing hockey can be. So this is where their first rather severe injury had happened while playing hockey. And then there had been a fall, and then there had been a car accident. And they said, yeah, there's been much more, but over and over, very, very athletic. And pain is a very, very strong motivator for change. But they really had to, it was amazing how these scenes were coming. As I was listening, I could tell because of working with so many athletes. And athletes attach very deeply to that identity of being really strong, almost high tolerance, very fit. I can take pain. Pain is gain. And a really almost, being healthy is wonderful, but almost abusive sometimes relationship. So, but they have children, and that's always two things, pain and children. Those are game changers, forgive the pun. So they were saying, for my children, I need to change. And so I was so touched. There were times when, this big, I think his handle is the Canadian guy, like this really, lumberjack. I think he was almost near tears as we were talking. And I said, okay, but, we're going to do more Pilates and subtle and probably won't look like much is going on. He says, I am ready. I am ready. I am so ready. So there was benefit in him kind of in a way being beaten down because he had this way of operating that was almost beating up. And that needed to change for the benefit of the self, the family. So I've heard this story. I've worked with clients, and I literally said to them, look, I'm hearing a story I've heard from so many other athletes. And even was talking to another one today who, what did it take to have a different way of conducting themselves that's more in line with our true spiritual nature, which is very nonviolent. And what, how can I still have that attainment, have that health, have that without the violence? And really had to go through a lot to get to that point of really having a different, I'm very excited. It's funny because I wouldn't say I know much of anything really, but I always feel comfortable proceeding because the one thing I do try and spend a lot of time understanding is this nature of nonviolence. So at least I can introduce that, even if I don't know maybe a lot about kinesiology, all of this, but definitely nonviolence is a topic I love. So even felt comfortable about explaining he would have to explore meditation as well if we're going to train. So a really different, and he said, yes, I'm ready to roll. He was so excited, just emailed me later the day. I'm good. I'm set up. Can we start tomorrow? I was very touched. So that readiness for change, and we're looking for a change again to create a different future. It's going to have to be aligned with our true nature.
There was something that you mentioned about attachment, that we have maybe attachments to the way that we need to be functioning, or how we maybe not take care of the body, or just our routine in a day. And I could see then that connection between attachment, or where you're like, I am ready to let go of certain fixed ideas or fixed routines because I need to change. So I could feel that there was a link between letting go and non-violence.
I think this is one of my favorite aspects, and it actually was a central topic in our spiritual lesson this morning. And I love a robust spiritual practice will get this part straight because it's central. And it's this idea of, we use the term letting go, and in this particular path, we use this term renunciation, same idea, detachment. But what it's actually saying is it's replacement. So, yes, there is attachment. The question is, what am I attached to? And as a thing I'm attached to, providing temporary gain, but long-term loss. That's really the issue. So how can I attach to something that will provide long-term gain, but ideally some instant attainment as well to keep me going? That's got to be in there too. So that's kind of, it's such a beautiful, because just to say, let go, okay, I know this is bad and I've got to detach. I think that's a very difficult thing to ask someone to do. But it's, if I can provide another option that's actually enjoyable, even in the immediate moment, but definitely is leading to long-term gain, again, aligned with my true nature, that's ideal. So I think that's so important to sort of sort out from the get-go when I'm looking at shifting gears or changing tracks, is to revise or understand within the self the benefit immediate, like it needs to be immediately satisfying. You can say, yes, I have a vision of where this is going, but really feels like it will provide something even in the short run, so that I'm very interested in continuing. But that replacement is really important.
When you're mentioning this instant, there needs to be some sort of instant fruit, instant attainment. Now, when it comes to physicality, physical change, some sort of gratification, even let's say if it was to, just be consistent with exercising to keep the body strong, there's some very, I guess you can say, perhaps, some tangible gain. But when it comes to spirituality, is the gain always going to be something like the instant peace, or is it sometimes just like a real sensible sense of awareness that, I'm getting closer to myself, or, there's realizations and insights? Because when it comes to spiritual, it's so invisible. It seems like maybe that's why there can be so much resistance, or souls feel like, I don't even want to start because what if I'm just going to fail?
We've kind of noticed a pattern. If souls even come to the doorstep of spirituality, is when they're exposed to spiritual ideas, they've come because there's some kind of seeking or longing. We even use the term seeker, but there's a seeking or a longing of some sort. So when they first come, that's immediately satisfied. Sometimes they're even moved to tears immediately. We kind of sometimes call this the honeymoon phase, but they're immediately satisfied. Great. But what that's always also done is activated the opposition. So we feel like, okay, at the beginning, it's like, yes, I want to do this. This is everything I've been looking for. It's fantastic. And then it feels like that sort of gets a bit reduced, that first feeling of instant attainment. It only means that the opposing, the old, is kind of pulling back. And I suppose if we were aware of that, it would help us out a lot. So we could sort of observe that, saying, I knew that was going to happen, that the old, the addictions, whatever, would pull back. But that doesn't mean that that first instant, that satisfaction that I experienced at the very beginning, it's still there. It's just being really, really moderated, if you will, or almost a little bit repressed by the kickbacks. So I need to know that's going to happen, incorporate that into the plan so that I don't get derailed, that there's going to be. So it's really nice to constantly, we use the phrase in this study, don't forget the days of your childhood, but constantly keep that taste of that. Yes, that what I was looking for was satisfied. This is still the same thing I've been looking for. I know that the old isn't going to like it, but this is what I've been looking for.
Would you say then that just even revisiting that, keeping that vibrant is a part of addressing things at the seed level?
Absolutely. With many athletes, they'll even visually or create some sort of visual memory of why they're doing what they're doing, how it's sad, and they'll put it somewhere. And so when the doubts and everything else, those kinds of thoughts or feelings come, that revising it through even a visual reminder, they'll see it. All those feelings of why they're doing everything will be kindled, ignited, and kind of be able to override. So revising it is really, really important, however one can. I even feel maybe write in a journal or something, those strong, how meaningful this is to you. So you can go back to it when those doubts or the carelessness, whatever you wish to call it, starts to come in.
Perhaps I'll just ask one more question, is that I know both of us have just returned from the spiritual headquarters, and what you took from your experience there in terms of self-transformation, what has been like that for you to sustain that momentum?
I can't believe how many I've spoken to who also have returned, and all having the same theme. What we've been doing to this point has been good because it's brought us to this point, but this feeling that something quite central has to shift in order to be able to continue to progress. Not even sure exactly what that is, but I think deep down we probably do know what it is. But I think that's the single thing. And I was just remembering today, it was quite interesting that just before going, someone who I'd been quite close to passed away. While I was there, someone in the team, their significant partner, passed away. And then just when we got back, someone else on the team, it was such a funny story, wrote in the most sudden way that their father passed away. So there was this kind of theme through the thing of such, the deepest change. And people would say, oh, that sounds very sad. But actually, because of course we also believe that the soul takes rebirth, there isn't that sorrow, but it was such strong indicators of deep change. And I think that's what I've taken away, being very quiet and almost, there's so many interesting ways that the old can come for myself or others that look like progress, but it's really just the same old stuff. So to be able to go deeper, the one thing is to think very little. trying to think very little to create space inside for that newness within to emerge. So those around me might want to talk a lot about things, to figure things out, whatever, and that's okay. But I literally just, it's almost as if you're giving rope to the old when we think too much. So that's been huge to create a space for change for me.
Thank you for sharing. I also have a little reflection now.
When we think of change, there's always that feeling of bringing out something new, new home, new relationship, new job, new hair color, new. A deep longing for something, but actually it's something quite familiar, not new at all, just long lost. Suggesting that within each of us, there is a memory, an ancient memory of where the change needs to be, returning to something original. And if I can create a quiet, sacred place inside and just listen, it might create that space for the ancient memory to speak, to be revealed, what I want to return to. Such a hopeful model of change, possible, almost inevitable. What I'm changing into is my true self. Not creating anything new, but simply returning to the self. Om Shanti.
Thank you to those who've joined with us this evening. Just a warm reminder that the Raj Yoga Foundations in Hindi will start this Wednesday, 4 sessions at the Inner Peace Center. Registration is available on the Calgary website and also on Eventbrite. If you go on Eventbrite, you just have to type in BK Calgary to get all the events for the center. I believe they will not be having them online. And so it's for on-site. There's also the workshop in English. That is the first Saturdays of every month. So the next one is happening this Saturday, April 1st. Again, that is on-site. So registration is also available for that on the website. But we have a lot of online sessions for those who like to take benefits. So please visit the website for that as well. And of course, at the Academy, we have our on-site session, practical meditation on Saturdays, 12:30 to about 1:15. So no registration needed, but just a check-in at the desk. And again, that's on site. It's not streaming online. So if you have any questions, any suggestions, feel free to let us know. Thank you for joining with us. Om Shanti.